Hi, in this video we will be covering how to factor quadratic trinomials. Recall that from yesterday's lesson on factoring GCFs that factoring means to break it up into two things that can be multiplied. Quadratic, when we say quadratic, we are referring to the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are integers, or in this case they're going to be integers. They aren't always integers, but they're numbers. So I'll just put A, B, and C are numbers, while you have the variables x squared and x. So technically any quadratic trinomial here, even if the variable was like A or Z instead of x, that it would still be quadratic. Okay, it has to be in the form specifically where you have a squared term, then a variable to the first term, and then what we call a constant term. So I'm going to come down here and say constant. And a number that is constant does not change, so it's a number all by itself. In other words, a number with no variable. So again, a trinomial is a polynomial with three terms. So 1, 2, 3. So if you want, you can pause the video and copy what I have through here, and then resume the video and I'll explain. When we factor quadratic trinomials, they factor into two binomial factors, usually. Every now and then you'll get one that won't factor, but we are learning to factor, so all of these will. So two binomial factors means we will have two terms inside each set of parentheses. So again, the factors of a quadratic trinomial are two binomial factors. And with quadratic trinomials, there are three types. And notice what's different about each of these. The form is still the same. We still have our ax squared, our bx, and our c terms. But in this case, we have two positives. In the second case, we have a negative then a positive. And in the third case, we have a negative and a negative. So remember that we've already multiplied two binomials. You just tested on that unit. So what we know is that when we FOIL together two binomials, on our last term, if you think about FOIL, when we do our last terms, this number times this number will always give us the sign of the last term. So in other words, if this was positive 2 and positive 5, we know that this number here would be positive 10. So what's important to look at when your constant term is positive is what the sign of the what's called linear term will be. So just to give you a little more terminology here, the x squared term is always referred to as the quadratic term. The term in the middle here to the first power is always known as the linear term. And again, we already referred to the number at the end here without the variable as the constant term. So I'm going to be using this terminology, the sign of the constant term and the sign of the linear term. So I want to make sure we define each of those real quick. So when we are factoring, we have to put in signs first. So if you look down here, your job is to first determine what signs to plug in. So this is how it works. If our constant term is positive, our signs will always be the sign of the linear term. So if my constant is positive, then I look to my linear term. If it is positive, I'm going to plug in my signs as plus, plus. Next, again, I have a constant positive term. So I'm going to look to my linear term. If my linear term is negative, my signs will be minus, minus. Now the last case here, if my constant term is negative, you've got to remember that the only way to multiply your last terms and get a negative is if one is positive and one is negative. So to get this constant number at the end, this negative number, we have to multiply a positive times a negative to get this negative. So therefore, 1 will be positive and 1 will be negative. And what you'll learn is that in the next lesson, sometimes where you put it matters. For today's lesson, it won't. So you can put minus and then plus, or you can do plus then minus. As long as they're opposite signs, you're good to go. So to, again, summarize, if our constant term is positive, we copy the sign of the linear term twice. If your constant's negative, you'll always have a plus minus. So if you're a person who likes words explained, then pause the video at this time, go back and listen to what I said and write it. That if the sign of your constant term is positive, you copy the sign of the middle term twice. If your constant is negative, you'll always have a plus and a minus. All right. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is that the trinomials we will be factoring today are all in the form x squared plus bx plus c to get you started. So what's the difference between what I just talked about and here? Well, your a value is an understood 1. So what will happen when you factor these quadratic trinomials is because our first term is x squared, you'll always have an x and an x to multiply to give you x squared. So again, the first thing you're going to do is determine what signs. You're always going to have the xx, and then we're going to proceed with the next step. So your job, feel free to pause it at this time to copy this down. Your job is to first determine what signs to plug in. Second, to find factors of your c, your constant term, that combine to give you b. So it's kind of like a little puzzle. You're going to find your factors of c that combine, which means to add or subtract, to give you your b value. Okay? So we're going to work out some examples on the next page, and then we're going to do a few from your Delta Math assignment. That way you'll have plenty to look at. Okay? So I'm going to give you 3 examples, and then we'll do the Delta Math ones. So notice what I have here. For examples A, B, and C, they are quadratic trinomials because they are in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, which tells me that they factor into 2 binomial factors. So notice I'm going to leave enough room to fit 2 terms in each set of parentheses. Same for B. And quadratic trinomial, so same for C. I also shared with you that the first step is to determine your signs in your binomial factors. So again, if your constant term is positive, we're going to copy the linear sign twice. So because this is positive 25x, I'm going to multiply a positive times a positive. For example B, my constant is positive, so I'm going to copy this sign twice. And for C, since my constant is negative, and the only way to multiply my last terms in FOIL is and get a negative is if I have a positive times a negative. So that when these 2 numbers get multiplied together, I have a negative 42. So that's your first step, your parentheses and your signs. And then, remember I told you that if it's x squared, it's going to be as simple as putting in x and x. So all of your answers today on Delta Math will start off just like this. Every single one. Write down the problem, write down your parentheses, write down an arrow if you have to look to your linear term to determine your signs. If you do that, it shows me that you're establishing a habit of checking to know what your signs are. And then you fill in x and x for your first terms in each binomial factor. So remember your last set of instructions were to find the factors of C that combine to give you B. So I'm going to draw an X right here because it's just kind of helpful to think about this. And then we're going to find the factors of C. So remember, we've been breaking down factors. And we're going to find the set that combines, so I'm going to draw this, to give you the B value. So I'm just going to come over here and draw an X to help me out. So for A, my constant term, C, is 100. My B value is 25. And I want to find the factors of 100 that combine to give me 25. So remember, we already know how to break down 25. In fact, if we were to list factors of 100, we know that 1 times 100 is 100. It's an even number, so 2 times 50 is 100. We know that 10 times 10 is 100. But remember, we're looking to find the set that these two numbers combine to give us 25. We should also know that 100 is 5 times 20. And we can always just use our calculator. If it ends in a 0, you know it's divisible by 10 and also 5. But look what we found. Oh, 5 plus 20 combined to give you 25. So once you find these numbers, if this breaks down into 5 and 20, and they combine to give you the middle number B, then I have found the correct factors and I simply write them in. And I'm done. So again, we are finding the factors of your constant term that combine to give us our linear coefficient, 25. And that's going to be 5 and 25. Now, how can I check your answer? You know that I'm good for always showing you how to check your answer. We're going to do exactly like we have been doing, where we put our answer into Y1 and our problem into Y1 and our answer into Y2. Make sure you can see it. All right, so now we've got it. So x squared plus 25x plus 100. And down here in Y2, I'm going to type in the quantity x plus 5 times the quantity x plus 20. That's how we actually say it correctly. And if this is correct, when I press second graph, all of my Y1s and Y2s will match. Oops, what did I do? I noticed up here, oh, my Y2s don't match. But that means I went back and said, ooh, what did I type in wrong? I forgot a 0 right here. So that's important. We have to understand that when it doesn't match, that tells us there's something wrong. Either we typed it in wrong or our answer is wrong. So luckily, I know my answer is right because I just accidentally left off a 0. And it matches. All right, and you're going to do that for each problem to make sure that when you're typing it in, it's correct. If you do it as a habit when you are when you are practicing in your notes and in your Delta Math classwork, then what you're going to find is that you'll do it when it comes to a quiz or test. So if you are still listening, come down here to your left margin and say Y1 equals problem, Y2 equals answer, check table for matching. Rewind that if you need to. That helps me know that you're paying attention to me teaching. But also, you'll have that hint. So next, we're going to do our little X deal for B, putting our constant term up here at the top, and our term here, -5, at the bottom. Well, this is interesting. If I start off with a positive and a negative, and I start off with a positive and I have to find two factors that give me a negative, that means actually, I need to change the number up real quick. Sorry about that. So if I'm going to have two numbers that are different signs, let me just do this real quick. I'm going to change up. Oh, nope. I wanted negative. All right, I'm going to change this problem up. So let's do me a favor. Cross that out. In our new problem, it's going to be x squared minus 8x plus 15. My apologies. So I'm going to go back in here, make a new x, and make this 15, positive 15 at the top with negative 8 down here on the bottom. So remember now, our job is to find the two factors of 15 that will combine to give us a negative 8. So in order to combine two numbers to get a negative 8, one's going to have to be, or they're both actually going to be negative. So think about your factors of 15. If I break down 15, I could use 1 and 15. In fact, I need a negative times a negative. That's what the whole point of this was, a negative times a negative. But what's negative 1 minus 15? That's negative 16. So this is not the correct choice. I could also multiply 3 and 5 together to get 15. Well, if I combine a negative 3 times a negative 5, I get negative 8. And that's what we're looking for. So that tells us that these are our correct factors, negative 3 and negative 5. So again, 15 is breaking down into negative 3 times negative 5 to give us the positive 15. But when we combine two negatives, we really just add them and keep the negative sign. So that tells us we're going to use the negative 3 and negative 5. And again, the order of this would not matter. We could write the quantity x minus 5 here and the x minus 3 over here, and it would be perfectly fine. So again, we can go to y1, type in our problem, y2, type in our answer, check our table, and it should match. Lastly, for C, I have a negative 42, so that's what I'm going to put at the top of my x. And I'm trying to find the factors that combine to give me an understood 1. Remembering that when I break these numbers down, in order to multiply to get a negative number, I'm going to have one positive and one negative. So that means I have to subtract the factors to get 1. So let's think. What can I multiply to get 42? Well, always 1 and 42. It's usually never that, though, but sometimes it is. It's an even number, so 42 divided by 2 is 21, but those don't subtract to give me 1. So they've got to be closer together in order to subtract and give me 1. So 42 divided by 3 is 14. So 3 and 14, that's not going to get me there. But I promise you the ones that you're going to see the most are common ones. So if I do 42 divided by 6, 42 divided by 6 is 7. And these I can subtract to get 1. So which one do I need to make positive and which one needs to be negative? Well, I really need negative 6 plus 7, which is the same thing as 7 minus 6. So that means I want my 7 to go where my plus is because it's positive, and my 6 to go where I wrote the minus. So we don't always have to go through a list. I'm just trying to illustrate this for notes purposes to help you understand that sometimes you have to look at multiple sets of factors, but a lot of times it'll just pop out at you if you know your multiplication tables really well. If you struggle with multiplication, this is going to be a little more challenging, so I wanted to show you how to make a list. So again, negative 42 can break down into the factors 7 times negative 6. And we're going to make the 7 positive and the 6 negative because 7 minus 6 is 1. And this is our answer. Make sure when you do this in your notes, in terms of work, that I am seeing your this little X here with you working it out. Whether you do the list or not, some of you will be able to just go straight to your factors, and that's fine, but I want to see this is your work and make sure you box your answer. In fact, if you are still listening, beside C, draw in a triangle. Just draw a quick triangle right beside C if you're still listening. All right, so now we're going to go to our Delta Math assignments. I've got 6 problems to work out. There are 21 problems in the set, but I'm doing 6 of them for you. So you will have 15 on your own. And you can probably guess it. You're going to have 5 where the signs are plus plus, 5 where the signs are minus plus, and 5 where the signs are plus minus. So again, the first thing I want you to get in the habit of is recognizing that quadratic trinomials factor into 2 sets of parentheses, so you can write 2 binomial factors. So feel free to pause the video at this point and write these problems down. And then fill in your signs and restart the video and see if you got your signs right. So here my constant's positive, so I'm going to copy that sign twice. Here my constant is positive, so I'm going to copy the sign of my linear term twice. For number 8, my constant term's positive, so I'm going to copy the sign of this linear term twice. So notice, this is where my eyes draw my attention every single time. Immediately, the first thing I do after writing my parentheses is look at the sign of this number, and if it's positive, I copy the linear sign twice. That's it. And then for 15 and 21, I have to multiply positive times a negative to get a negative 80. So I'm going to put positive negatives. Or you can do minus, plus, either way. All right, so again, my job is to find the factors of 15 that combine to give me 8. And you're probably going to go, that's easy. 5 and 3 make 8. And you're exactly right. So it's 5 and 3. And you would put in your x's. And that's it. You're done. So while up here I was trying to illustrate, how to think it through. If you're catching on, that's really all there is to it. So the factors of 15 are 5 and 3. They multiply to give us 15. So they multiply to give us 15, but they add to give us 8. And that's your job. For number 7, again, we put in our x's. The factors of 24, well, there's several, but our job is to find the ones that add together to give us 11. So we've got 1 and 24, but 1 and 24 makes 25. We've got 2 and 12, but that makes 14. I'm trying to get 11. We have 6 and 4, but 6 plus 4 is not 11, it's 10. And 8 and 3. 8 and 3 add to give us 11. So it's going to be 8 and 3. And again, we can type this problem into Y1, our answer into Y2, and check. So some of them are going to be super obvious, like for 15, 5 and 3 give us 8. And then there's going to be other ones that just make you think a little bit about what are all the possible factors that I can use to multiply and get 24. That's all. For number 8, again, whether both are positive or both are negative, you're going to add the factors to get the b value. So you might look at 36 and go, 6 and 6 give us 12. And you're absolutely right. So we're going to fill in our x's, and 6 and 6 give us 12. But more specifically, this is negative 6x and negative 6x that combine to give us negative 12x when we FOIL. So it's just like reverse FOILing, pretty much. X times x gives us x squared. Negative 6x combined with negative 6x gives us negative 12x. And negative 6 times negative 6 gives us 36. Next, put in my x's. And again, this time I'm using 24, but I need my number to come out to be negative 10. So I need 2 negative numbers that I can multiply to give me, that combine to give me negative 10. So remember, when they're both negative, you're going to add them. It's just going to be a negative number. Well, this time, instead of 8 and 3, because 8 and 3 give us 11, we can use 4 and 6, where both are negative. Does that make sense? Negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24, but negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10. So I'm going to plug in my minus 4 and my minus 6. And again, it's the same thing as the quantity x minus 6 times the quantity x minus 4. So either way you write it will be correct. Again, I should go here and model for you that we would like to see in your work. So it pops out at us, your answer. But this is also work that we should see, unless it's like a super easy one. Next for 15, this one's a little bit different. This time, because I have a negative up here and a positive down here, my job is to subtract these two numbers because I have a positive and a negative. So when I combine a positive and negative, I'm really subtracting. All right, so think about negative 80. So it might pop out right away at you, but just in case it doesn't for others, we've got 1 and 80, 2 and 40, 4 and 20, 8 and 10. Oh, I can subtract 8 and 10 to make 2. So that's what I'm going to use. In fact, if one of them is going to be 10 and one's 8, which one do I need to subtract to get a positive 2? I need it to be 10 minus 8. So again, think about this breaking down. Negative 80 can break down into 10 times negative 8, but 10 minus 8 is 2. So I'm going to plug my x's in here, and then my 10 is positive, so I'm going to put it where I put my plus sign, and my 8 is negative, so I'm going to put it where I put my minus sign. And again, a quick check would show us that x times x is x squared. 10x minus 8x is 2x, and 10 times negative 8 is negative 80. And I'm going to put a box around it. All right, and lastly, I've got negative 70 on top and 3 here on the bottom. It might pop right out at you because it ends in a 0, which means that 10 is a factor of 70. And in fact, 10 and 7 can be subtracted to give you a positive 3. So if that's the case, then I want 10 minus 7, so I get the 3. So I'm going to come over here and put x and x. I want my 10 to be positive so that when I subtract 7, I get positive 3. But again, if this middle term was to be negative, so for instance, if I have x squared minus 3x minus 70, how would that be different? I would need still 7 and 10, but I would need the 10 to be negative and the 7 to be positive. So because negative 10 plus 7 is negative 3. So this is just an extra example of how it would be different if it was minus minus, okay? You just have to make the larger of the two factors negative. All right. So that takes care of it. Go into Delta Math. You can go ahead and enter in these 6 answers and then complete the remainder of the problems. You'll have 15 more to do on your own. Please use your show examples if you need help, or watch an extra video if you like, or refer back to your notes, but certainly you can contact your teachers during their Zoom time for help as well. Good luck.